All right, well, I'll go ahead and get started because we only have an hour, I know, for lunch. If we haven't met, I'm Keith Pirtle. I'm the program manager for PARB, and Shelby is also on the call. You want to wave, Shelby? She's our Oklahoma County coordinator and outreach coordinator. Um, so even though you know you guys maybe don't think about the PARB rules all the time, I do. So I'm kind of excited to share this with you. This really isn't supposed to be like a PARB 101, but more of what does the statute say? What does policy say? But I think it's nice to, well, I'll just kind of go into that. And just I do want some discussion during this. I mean, not a lot because I got a lot of content, but if you have some questions or something doesn't sound right to you, let me know. Um, so to start with, so let's talk about the rules. So PARB statutes and best practice. So first, why do we even need to go over this? Because, you show up for your reviews. Can you help with a mute there? Let's see.
Yes, it doesn't look like I have the capability to do it from my end. I just realized that. Mm,
I just made you
let's see.
co-host, so that should do it.
Perfect, thank you.
But, one of the reasons, and we've started that recent credentialing process as well. One of the things is a lot of what I've seen happen in PARB, a lot of boards have been around for, decades. And a lot of things are done basically out of habit. And there's nothing wrong with necessarily the way that some boards do some things, but I really want you to understand why you're doing them that way. And if you just choose to do it that way, great. But if you want to change, I want you to know what kind of the statute or the policy that you're kind of leaning towards is. Also, there might be a more efficient way of doing it. That's, at our annual conference, we always kind of put peers together because I want you guys to see there's more than one way to do PARB. And I do hear all the time, I know Shelby does as well, that people learn from each other that way. And a lot of this kind of compliance is kind of coming out of our switch to the database a few years ago. And I know that's been a struggle for some folks. We had to move to the modern era of the computer system where you type your recommendations and they're printed. We just had to do that. It allows us to track data and that sort of thing. So a lot of those kind of things that are kind of the rules are mandatory are really more process oriented. Um, and we also kind of would like to move towards, what is a standard, what is the best practice, and kind of figure that out as we can train people. And any of this, or a lot of this is really up for debate. If there's something that just doesn't quite sound right for you on some of this policy and you want to talk about it, let's talk about it. So what I'm going to be referring to, and I'll email this out to everybody that's on this call, or if someone else wants it later, just let me know, is we've got our PARB statutes, excuse me, our PARB policies, which we have a couple recent ones I'll go over. We've got our training manual. Has everybody read the training manual front to back? No? It's pretty dry, but it's a good reference document, and it really is something that you should have to kind of flip through that has all of our statutes in it. And of course, our new credentialing checklist, if you've had me come out and kind of review with your boards or credentialing assessment checklist, that also you can learn something. So, when I started working for state government many decades ago, I didn't understand how state agencies were kind of run by actually state law. I assumed that, the Department of Human Services or some other state agency, somebody just wrote some policy somewhere and that's kind of what you followed. I didn't realize that everything that you do is written down in a state statute somewhere. It's state law. So to change those things, at least the significant things, it has to go back to the legislature. For example, when we were trying to get out from underneath the Open Meeting Act a couple of years ago, that had to go back to the state legislator to make that happen. Nonprofits, they have a mission and they have policies, but state agencies have actual laws that we have to follow. So anytime I'm trying to make sure that we're doing our job the way they're supposed to, I flip through the statutes. And if you didn't know already, in Oklahoma, most of the children's services are in Title 10 or Title 10A, like any child welfare policy, Office of Juvenile Affairs policy. Anything related to kids in custody or children's issues are going to be in Title 10, and that's no exception for us. So here's kind of a list of where our statutes are. Chapter 51, Section 116.2, 3, 4, and 6 in Title 10. And also in Title 10A, Chapter 6, Section 16103, and Chapter 9, Section 19118. So that's where they can be referenced. If you look at the initial intent of the legislature when setting up PARB, they were trying to follow examples for other states. And of course, Oklahoma at the time, that's when the Commission on Children and Youth was started. We were losing track of kids in state custody, and kids in state custody were being abused. And so this philosophy of a independent citizen-led, that's one thing I want you guys to hear. It's intentionally citizen-led. Foster care review program will be in operation in every judicial district. It was originally called foster care review boards. In other states, they tend to call it that. We call ours Post Adjudication Review Board, which basically says that's when we review cases after they've been adjudicated. And another line from statute that I think kind of lays out the foundation is Post Adjudication Review Board shall function in an advisory capacity to the district judge. So one of your main things that you're trying to do is support the judge, provide, advice to them. Not that you can't disagree, but I mean, if you're kind of looking at the philosophical point of the statute, those are kind of the things I always go to. So I'll start going through some of the statutes just one at a time, just highlighting some stuff. So Section 1162 is about establishing the board's membership, training, and organization. So again, we're supposed to be in every judicial district. So let me show you the map real quick. So those pie shapes, those are the 26 judicial districts in Oklahoma, right? So the statute says we're supposed to have one PARB in every one of those pie shapes. So if you look at the panhandle there, that's in light gray. We do not have a PARB in that judicial district. We also do not have one in the Jackson, Harmon, Greer, Kiowa, Tillman area. If you look at, say, the southeast, Pushmataha, McCurtain, and Choctaw, we do have a PARB there, but we only have one in Pushmataha. We don't have McCurtain and Choctaw. So why would you want multiple boards in one district? I mean, more than one board in a district. So like say Pushmataha, why would you want McCurtain and Choctaw covered? It really is a question. See who lasts longer. Okay, you guys are going to last long. Well, I think a lot of times in the local boards, the way they're set up is you typically meet in the courthouse because you're reviewing the case files. Case files don't leave courthouses. So if you are reviewing the hard case file, and not every county does, but most of them do, you really are only reviewing the cases in that county or the case files in that county. Can some board cover more than one county? Yes, absolutely. The Beckham Roger Mills is one board. They meet in Roger Mills and Cheyenne twice a year. Every other month they're meeting in Beckham County. So they can rotate and they actually go to that county, to that courthouse, and look at those case files. So that's a possibility. So obviously, ideally, and what the legislature wanted is for us to review every single case. And we'll go over that here in a minute. And to do that, we really need a PARB either rotating into that county or we need a PARB in every county. Membership guidelines: members must be residents of or employed within the judicial district which the board serves and shall be appointed by the director of the Commission on Children and Youth after consultation with judges in the judicial district where they want to serve. So that goes back to the local citizen-led. The whole point is you need to be a part of that community where you want to serve. So if you live in, say, Chickasha and Caddo County, but you want to serve in Canadian County, you can't unless you work there. because you're not part of that community necessarily. Um, and the application process, I know, it kind of tends to take forever. The judge has a right to say, I don't think this person's a good fit for the board. Doesn't happen very often, but it certainly can and has. And then after that happens, then I take it after running the background check and I send it to my director for final approval. So that follows that statute. Let's see. And board members have a term of 5 years. If you've served on a PARB for more than 5 years, there's nothing in that rule that says you're kicked off. You're supposed to renew your membership. That's kind of why we kind of do a renewal drive. But there's honestly no repercussions for letting that expire. No one's checking that. So I don't get real uptight about that. If it's been 5 years and you want to keep going, great. We do have a reapplication form. And one thing that we do get kind of stuck at is this 5-member minimum. We really can't maintain a board if it has less than 5 members because the statute is very clear that a board must have at least 5 members. Sometimes we'll drag our feet and we're down to 4 or 3 till we can kind of recruit some more. But especially starting a new board, we have to have a minimum of 5. We hear this too, and this is on the checklist. So the statutes say 1 member shall be a person who has training or experiences in issues concerning child welfare. Doesn't say they must. To me, that kind of gives guidance. It's nice to have someone on a board that has child welfare experience, but if you don't, that's okay. Or who has demonstrated an interest in children through voluntary community service. So everybody that shows up to a PARB falls under that category. Whenever possible, you want to have a foster parent. So we certainly want to recruit foster parents. Again, that's a guideline, not a mandate. And this one you've probably never seen before. No more than 1 person employed by any child welfare agency or juvenile court may be appointed on a board at the same time. Why do you think that might be the case? Oh, Shelby, I know you know the answer to this one. Try.
No, I was gonna say I can always jump in here as well if it gets too quiet. There doesn't need to be the conflict of interest, and kind of like if you have 2 people from the same agency, there can kind of be like there's that conflict there a little bit of like,
Undue influence is the way I look at it. So like,
yeah,
especially
yeah, influences.
yeah, if
Yeah.
you had a foster care
Yeah.
placement agency and
Mhm.
you had 3 out of your 5 members on the board working at the same agency, they could say, well,
Exactly.
we think we should refer everybody to our agency. That's kind of the intent. That doesn't really happen either, but we do have to follow that rule. You probably didn't know this either. I always ask this when I'm out doing a credentialing visit, but I always ask, you guys vote on your chair every year? And most of the time people look at me like, no, and we're not going to. We really like our chair and we don't want them to know that we have to vote them every time. But that is part of the statutes as well, that they will annually elect a chair. And I would encourage you guys to do that, at least talk through it, give your chair a break and maybe spread out some of the work. A list of members for each board and its officers shall be filed with the presiding judge within your district. You certainly want to keep the judge informed of your members. So how often to meet? Most boards meet once a month, but the statutes say they should meet as often as they need to. So if you're in, say, Canadian County that has a lot of cases, I'd say at a minimum you want to meet once a month, right? If you're, say, in Craig County, which is Veneta, that's the only board that meets only twice a year. All the others, we have some that meet once. We have a couple that meet once a quarter, and a few others that meet every 2 months, but the majority of them meet monthly. So policy regarding guest attending, we recently needed some clarity. We actually had a legislator attend a couple of our PARB meetings. And we've had other kind of child advocates that wanted to attend attend PARB meetings, and we kind of felt like we needed to kind of update our policy on that. So if you are, a guest who wants to observe a meeting, well, first, there's only a limited number of people that can even do that because you're reviewing confidential information. You're a member that's had a background check. That's a very secretive is not the right word, just confidential meeting, right? And not everybody has a right to be there, but there are a few exceptions. If you want to attend another PARB board, say you're the chair and you want to see how another board meets, or you just want to, kind of see how that works, you can do that. Prospective members, we always kind of encourage, especially in Oklahoma County and Tulsa County, we encourage folks to attend a meeting just to, for one thing, to see if it's going to be, if that board is going to be a good fit for them. And also just so they kind of understand what they're getting into, what it kind of looks like. Students, we have folks that are going through the child welfare training at CCAN. One of their extracurricular credits they can get is to attend a PARB meeting. So we have students attend PARB meetings all the time. Researchers like Lisa White from the E-team, she needs to attend a meeting. Staff, so Shelby and I can attend any meeting. And if there's someone, a legislator who is part of the subcommittee on health and human services, not any legislator, can attend. So those are kind of who can do it. And they have to request it ahead of time. The conditions, they have to have written approval 7 days ahead of time, and that can be by email. Most of the time it's going to be fairly informal, and your chair can help facilitate this, or your staff person. If you have a question, reach out to me, or Sarah Lynn is here as well, or Shelby. We also have a confidentiality form that we have everybody sign. If they're a student or a prospective member, we need that signed. And I like to maybe also kind of, look them in the eye, so to speak, and not make sure they're not just signing a form and not knowing what it is, but say, okay, you understand we're talking about stuff that you can't talk about in Sunday school. You can't talk about this, with your spouse, with, whoever. And they also need to know why. Again, in the last year, we've had some people that maybe had some motivation that was less than supportive of PARB for attending meetings, and we want to know why. They need to have a reason to be there. Again, this doesn't come up much. I emailed this policy out recently to everybody, and I'll email it out again. If someone's presenting information, we've had occasionally, we encourage foster parents, though it doesn't happen very often. Foster parents can come and share information on their case. And we've had a couple of bio parents want to share their perspective too. If that happens, they do have a right to do that. We don't encourage it. It makes the meeting a bit of a logistical mess, but it can, by statute, it can happen. But it needs to happen in the right way. And if, if you do have a parent, especially reach out and say they want to present information on their case, or a foster parent, reach out to your staff person, either me, Sarah Lynn, or Shelby, and we'll help you figure that out, how to do that. And it needs to be part of their case that you're reviewing anyway. We're not going to do a special review, that sort of thing. And again, eligible guests, the child and custodian of a child in a case being reviewed, foster parents, and individuals with pertinent information. So CASA often will attend a meeting and stay the whole meeting in addition to child welfare. That's certainly encouraged to share their perspective. It doesn't have to be as formal every time, but there's someone who can be there. So training requirements. So everybody who's a new member has to go to the new member orientation, and then our training manual says 4 hours annually. And like anything in life, we have some people that get 20 hours of training in a year, and some people that get 0. I would encourage Shelby and Sarah Lynn and I have better things to do than to browbeat you about attending training. Obviously, you guys are the choir because you're here. but we have virtual training. We record a lot of stuff like today that you can watch. Maybe ask your members, hey, I attended this training. I learned a lot. I heard it's recorded. If you want to just ask Keith or one of your staff person, they can send you the video. And we do try to update things on a fairly regular basis. So if you haven't been to a PARB training in 2 years, then I encourage you to do that. And of course, we have our annual conference. We try our best to make that so awesome and wonderful that you'll want to come and be a part of that. Out-of-pocket expenses. This is another one of those kind of like, I wouldn't call it secret, but not something we promote a lot. Our legislation does say that even though you are volunteers, and in other states, they have review boards that actually are reviewed by staff. It's a different philosophy. That you shouldn't have anything out of pocket to be a volunteer. And I would certainly agree with that. So if there is something that you need to be reimbursed for, travel to a meeting, training expense, purchasing yellow paper, but we keep reams of yellow paper in our office. So let me know if you need it and I'll get it out to you. But we have some people send us receipts for paper or even ink cartridges for printing. We have a limited budget, of course. So if we get inundated with receipts, it's going to be a bit of a challenge. But if you're struggling, you're someone who's spending money to attend a PARB meeting and participate in PARB, and it's a financial struggle for you, reach out to your PARB staff person and let's figure that out. You shouldn't pay for the privilege of volunteering as a PARB member. Removing a member, we also just updated that policy with our state PARB. It's pretty straightforward. I'm not really going to go into it, but the biggest thing is disclosing information that you learn as a PARB member with groups that you shouldn't be doing that to. So just don't do that. Okay, so Chapter 51, Section 1163. What cases should you review and how often? So I want to spend a few minutes on that. So you probably hear us say all the time, every case, every 6 months. That's basically it. Every adjudicated deprived case. So it's not those, let's call them INS, family-centered services is what they call it now. I always get the terminology from 20 years ago, family-centered services cases have not been adjudicated deprived, so we don't review those. We don't review an initial, emergency custody hearing. We review after adjudication. Once a judge has said this kid is legally designated as deprived, that's when we look at the case until they reach permanency. And we do that every 6 months. And you've probably heard me preach, a lot of times judges look at cases every 3 months. If you're looking at too many cases and you're being buried in cases, don't look at it every time the judge does. Look at it every 6 months. That's where we fall under. And also, and I know this is probably new to a lot of you, submit to the court your recommendation within 10 days of any review hearing. We want to time it so that the judge gets your recommendation before the hearing. So they get they're getting their child welfare reports before they see that case. And we want them to get the PARB report before they hear the case as well. And I keep the statutes all hyperlinked. That's what those are up there. And so I can look for any updates. Of course, it's not updated very often, but I will be emailing that out. And you may not know this either. And we've done some training on how to do the case review. There's some guidance in the statute as well. The appropriateness of the goals and objectives on the ISP, the timeliness, the appropriateness of services. And again, the statute says the reports to the court should be scheduled to ensure that the court receives the findings and recommendations of the review board prior to their 6-month review of the case. Also, if they've been adjudicated, but if they're currently out of the home and have been for 6 months, it's hard to identify this. And frankly, they shouldn't be out of the home for more than 6 months without being adjudicated anyway. But you just need to know that. And you can ask child welfare that, or your judge or bailiff, if there are any kids that are out of home that have not been adjudicated. And if they say yes, I'd say why. they need to be adjudicated. Um, okay, ICPC cases, and I know people are not really doing this. I ask this all the time, but an IC interstate compact, that's where a kid is, say, in has a court case in Paris, Texas, but grandma lives in Hugo. So the kid is actually living in Hugo, but the case is in Texas, right? So what's supposed to happen is in Texas, they're supposed to call the Hugo, that county would be McCurtain, I think. They call the McCurtain County Child Welfare Office and say, hey, we've got this case, but we don't have staff there. We need you to go visit this family and check on the ISP and all that. And the same would happen if say McCurtain County had a case and the grandma, the kid that has the case in McCurtain County is actually living somewhere in Texas. Child welfare would be out visiting that. That's the interstate compact. And a lot of time PARBs don't review those cases because they're not going to be on the docket. The judge is not reviewing those. So if you start by looking at the judge's docket, you are not going to know about these cases. So you really have to talk to child welfare and find out if there's cases in your county there. So you can read that, but basically we're supposed to look at those cases. And I think that's an area that really needs some oversight, but it takes some work to do that. Any questions on that piece? All right. You guys can reach out to me later and we can have a one-on-one conversation to talk through some of this if you want. Delinquent cases. There's a couple boards that still look at, if you're not familiar with it, delinquent is where usually in the Office of Juvenile Affairs custody or something to that extent. I really don't understand that side of the bench, so to speak. It's still a juvenile court case where a kid has broken the law. It's not because of safety of the child. It's because they've broken some offense, to run away, stolen a car, whatever. They're adjudicated as a juvenile in need of supervision. We can review those cases at the judge's discretion. In my 6 years as program manager for PARB, I've not pushed that because we're not reviewing every child welfare case in the state. And until we do that, I'm not pushing it. If you guys board wants to look at those cases and your judge wants you to look at those cases, great. You can do that, but you have to have the judge's permission to do it. Who gets copies of the recommendation? Everybody who's a party to the case, plus child welfare, needs a copy of it. Your court clerk should know. So I would have a conversation with them. Can you help me make sure that this recommendation is getting to everybody that it needs to? And it even says in our statute, I wouldn't necessarily throw this in their face, but you could have a little casual conversation. It shall be the duty of the court clerk to ensure that all documents filed pertaining to the case of an adjudicated child are properly noted and affixed to the file. So if you hand your recommendation to the court clerk and say, please file this, they're supposed to be processing it. And they do. They're really helpful most of the time. But sometimes, occasionally we get a little pushback. I'm busy. I got other stuff to do. If you have that, let me know. I'll help figure it out. And also the bailiff. And if you're not familiar, I feel like all these statutes are really focused on rural areas. Tulsa and Oklahoma County, your staff person's doing most of this work. And your chair is doing a lot of this work behind the scenes. But I think it's important that you know how this works. So your bailiff is basically your judge's secretary, right? When I heard a bailiff, always some sitcom where you've got a policeman sitting with Judge Watner, keeping an eye on things. They're basically your the secretary to the judge. So they're kind of a gatekeeper to the judge. They create the docket, the deprived docket, and that you need that. So make sure that you're visiting with your bailiff to make sure that you understand what cases need to be reviewed that are coming up before the judge. The court process statute and everything I'm referencing here is straight out of statute. I may have reworded it some, I've left some stuff out, But this is in your statute. So the board may solicit the attendance at its meetings of persons known to the board with information concerning the case. You could ask the T-ball coach to come and talk about the case. You could. You can ask anybody to attend the meeting to talk about the case that you want. I did put mute on my phone, but the alert went through anyway. You can ask anyone. You know, some attorneys have come in the past. Others have come. You can do that. Most of the time, it's going to be child welfare and CASA that attend your meetings, but you certainly can ask. Shall be the duty of the court having jurisdiction to acknowledge receipt. That's why on the recommendation, there's a place for the judge's signature. It's nice when they sign it. They don't always sign it. You know, judges are kind of doing their own thing, but you do need to confirm that they're getting them. If they're, and again, a review board member may attend any court hearing concerning the case of any child subject to the review. So you can attend court. Should you ask the judge before doing so? What do you guys think?
It seems this it seems like a common courtesy.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Kanda. Yeah, I mean, it's they're used to, you know, and these are confidential hearings. Not everybody's allowed in there, and they want to know who's there. You certainly, I would have a conversation if you've got some members who can and want to attend court. I would encourage you to do that, but you really need to have a conversation with the judge, or you know, maybe start with the bailiff and then the judge, and say, hey, would it be okay if one of our members attended? We really would learn more. Most judges are very much in favor of that, but I would have a conversation before just showing up. And our statutes say that we can. We don't technically have to have permission. I probably shouldn't say that out loud, but I would get it anyway. Because again, you know, we're an arm of the court. I think I've already talked a lot about the confidentiality. You can't use this information any other way. And the statutes are very clear of that. I wanted to just, even though this is about local boards, I just wanted you to know that we do have statutes in there about what state PARB does. And it has kind of these 4 bullet points that oversees the PARB program in partnership with, you know, the Commission on Children and Youth. We make policy recommendations to the courts, agencies. We were looking at the severe lack of foster homes at our last meeting. And we identify and solve issues within the foster care system. And if you didn't know already, there are 5 slots on our state PARB that belong to local members. So you got JJ Wagner on there from Cleveland County. You've got Cindy Humphrey from Garfield County. You've got Cindy Nocton from Comanche County that serve on that board. And then we also support or submit recommendations every year to the commission. And those come from when I asked you guys in December, if you have any systemic issues that you're concerned about, I'm asking you for those. We'll compile those and I'll take them to the state team for review, or state PARB. If Jeff, my old life back just jumped out there. So I want to make sure everybody understands this. 2 years ago, the legislature says that our local boards no longer fall under the Open Meeting Act. That means you do not have to post agendas. You do not have to do minutes. You do not have to have a quorum that's one more than half of your membership. But there are some things that we still want to make sure that you guys do. And the reason we push that, and the reason is these meetings are closed meetings. The Open Meetings Act is meant to be so that a member of the community can come and say, hey, I think you guys should look at this issue or that issue. You're not doing that at PARB meetings. You're reviewing cases. So there's no point if someone from the public attended your meeting, they'd be kicked out immediately anyway, once you went into executive session. So there's no point. So, and there's been some legislators out there saying that we tried to do this to be shifty, to hide from the public. Public wasn't allowed in our meeting anyway, because we're reviewing confidential cases. So, but But we felt like we needed a few rules to kind of replace those rules, just some organizational rules. So we did pass this policy last in May of 24. Basically, a quorum is 3 people. You have 5 people on your board, a quorum is 3 people. You have 20 people on your board, a quorum is 3 people. We did it that way because if you have less than 3 people, you've got 2 people, that's a conversation. That's not a meeting. That's you and one other person talking. I really felt like you needed a minimum of 3 people to staff the case and to get diverse opinions there. You can also, for the first time, you couldn't do this before, you can have members attend virtually. We don't really harp on this either, but you can only attend half the meetings virtually. Most rural boards don't do that, don't meet virtually. I don't like it. I think it's, maybe I'm old school, but not a big fan of virtual meetings. But if you've got a sick kid and you really want to attend the meeting, but you can't because you're staying home with a sick kid or something else came up, you can put yourself on speakerphone and call in. You can set up a Zoom or whatever. That is allowed. You are allowed to do that. Then, of course, we want your meeting dates every year. We still ask that you submit your meeting dates because, you know, I'm going to know when your members need to know when you have your meetings. I want to know when you have your meetings. Your judge needs to know when you have your meetings. So if you set your meeting dates at the beginning of the year and any changes, be sure and let all those people know. Really appreciate that. But you don't have to file those with the court clerk. You might let the court clerk know, but you don't have to file them. So all good. Anything in the chat I need to address? Exactly. So one thing, so now we're getting to some of the common sense procedural rules. So the PARB chair or their designee must provide all information by the PARB program staff. That's me, Shelby, and Sarah Lynn, if you didn't know, which may be needed for overall program functioning and evaluation. This includes, but is not limited to, the annual meeting dates I was just talking about, any membership changes, and the volunteer hour reporting. Everybody knows you record your volunteer hours straight into the database now, which is real easy if you know how to do that. Your chair or your staff person should be doing that. If you're in Oklahoma County and Tulsa County, your staff person is probably doing that for you. I've had boards and still somewhat do that don't always communicate with me really well. So that's why we kind of have this policy in there. Is we do need some minimum communication. I don't think that's too high of a standard. If you think so, let me know. We'll talk it through. And use of the PARB database is now required for writing and tracking PARB case review information and for submission to the court. This means every review is in the database every time. The minimum data is completed, so anything with a red star is in there. I would argue too that I really like your CAV and your KK number in there too, so we can cross-reference with child welfare, but we don't have that as a required field because I don't want you to not be able to enter your recommendation because you can't find the KK number. Recommendations are printed from the database and submitted to court. That way they can be read. There's no reason not to do that. And if you're struggling with that, let me know and I'll help you work on that. And the last one on there, the database is used to create the case review list. Really not very many PARBs do it that way. And I wish they would, because you can export case information into Excel and sort that way when the last review date was, everything else. But I just wanted to call that to your attention. If that's something you're interested in, or you're not doing it now, let me know. And I'm the king of spreadsheets. I'll help you figure that out. I want to go back to the volunteer reporting for federal funding. If you didn't know already, we get 4E federal money through Department of Health and Human Services that really helps our budget. And we do that by tracking the total volunteer hours. So that's real important that we get those hours. And it doesn't have to be exact, but it's any time you spend, like this time counts. The meeting time counts. If you're reviewing a case before a meeting, after a meeting, dropping off recommendations, that counts as well for your time. All right, best practices. I'm actually think I might get through it all today. Any questions so far? All right. So ideal case review management. I kind of hinted at this earlier. What I mean by case review management is identifying which cases you want to review. Again, I always hate that we have kind of urban and rural boards or non-urban boards are so different, because in Oklahoma County and Tulsa County, your staff person is identifying the cases for you because there's just too many cases to review. Though as we add boards, the gap between the number of cases and the number of cases reviewed is really going down in Oklahoma and Tulsa County, thanks to those board members reviewing so many new cases. But I would always say, you know, start with the upcoming deprived docket. And again, the bailiff can help identify that. Then you can, in the database, not always people do this, but there's a slot for next review date. So let's say you're looking at the Smith case here and it's really complicated. And you say, I really want to look at this next month to find out if, you know, dad made it out of prison or something. You can write down the next review date as your next review date, right? You can look at cases more often than 6 months. You just only have to look at them every 6 months. You can write down next review date as your next meeting. Or you can say next review date, well, this family's doing great. I think we can look at them in 6 months and write that as in 6 months. Then when you're sorting in the database, you can sort by next review date, and that automatically will give you your list of cases that you need to review at your next meeting because you're sorting by that review date. You're done. And even if you're, you know, obviously you need to look at the docket because you need to add new cases. But if you get in the habit of entering that next review date, don't think of it as required field. Think of it as a helpful field when you want to look at it next. And then, you know, perhaps at some point get some visit with your local child welfare contact and kind of say, you know, hey, do you think we really need to look at this case again next month, or can it wait a while? You dictate when you review cases, not child welfare, but they know the case is better than you. And I think getting their input is very, very helpful. Other things to keep in mind, you know, we have wonderful PARB chairs that do a whole lot of work. I love it whenever the work is distributed out a little bit better. Maybe one person gets the docket from the bailiff. Maybe one person picks up the case files. Maybe one person makes sure that the calendar is created, you know, something like that. Make sure that the database, because you can really burn out one person if they're doing all the work. And also if that person leaves and they know how to run everything, and I see this all the time, the board falls apart. If one person that's been doing it all by themselves for 20 years and then they leave, that board falls apart. It's also, I think, very important to have a healthy relationship with your judge. A lot of judges don't really attend. I mean, they shouldn't attend meetings because you're reviewing their cases. Some judges will maybe say, you know, hello. The Love County judge, I'm blanking on his name right now. He always brings donuts to the boards. I didn't mean to set the expectation everybody else, but judge always brings donuts for his board every they meet once a quarter. Judge Hicks, that's his name. You know, other judges will maybe every once in a while kind of come by and just say hi to the board. Some judges, they really kind of keep fairly distant. That's okay, but I would visit with the judge and say, ask how they want to be treated, you know. And at minimum, you should feel comfortable talking to that judge, and that judge should feel comfortable talking to you. Also know your district director, but have the permanency supervisor attend your meeting. If you're not familiar with it, the district director is your highest ranking child welfare permanency planning person in your district, right? So they're the ones making the decision. I try to have a relationship with every district director in the state because I want to be able to problem solve anything that pops up. I want them to know me and I want to know them so we can figure things out. They're not the ones who should be at the meeting. They're more of an administrative. They're not going to know the case information. Typically, a permanency supervisor is going to be the good fit for that role. Again, Tulsa and Oklahoma County, visit with your staff person to figure out who that should be. Um, um, and sometimes it's not a supervisor level. Sometimes it's someone, you might have a couple of staff come in and kind of rotate. It just kind of depends. But I would encourage you, if no one on your board knows who the district director is for your county, for your board, find out. I can help broker that relationship as well. Ideal reporting from child welfare. This is one of those areas, again, that every board does it a little bit differently. Some boards have very specific, these PARB reporting forms and different versions of it that child welfare fills out and hands to the board ahead of time. That's kind of an established pattern that's been going on for 30 years. If you're in a county where that's happening and you're getting these distinct PARB specific reports from child welfare on the cases you're reviewing, great. I'm not going to throw cold water on that, but I'm also not going to make a new board do it. I'm not going to make child welfare do more work. They should have an updated ISP, otherwise known as their court report, that is due 7 days before court for that kid. So there should be an updated report in the case file, or you can talk to that supervisor and get a copy of it that you can read, and should have updated information without getting a special report that they have to write for you. If you're not getting those reports, again, let me know. I can help broker that or figure out what's going on. But that to me is kind of the minimum. And then a verbal report that is organized, short, and does not take the entire meeting. My preference, and if you're doing it differently, I'm not saying you're doing it wrong. I'm telling you my preference is you start the meeting without child welfare there and give people a chance to say hello, get a cup of coffee, review a case file, look back on what they wrote last time, read whatever they need to read, and start to form questions before child welfare walks in the door. And then when child welfare is there, have them there for a very specific length of time. I've attended some boards where child welfare is there the entire 2-hour meeting, and they're sitting there playing on their phone or wondering when someone's going to ask them a question. These are very busy people, and I think we should only have them there when we're engaging with asking them questions, and then they have a stop point and they leave. So they're here from this time to this time to ask questions. Again, these are kind of my opinion, best practices. I'm not saying you're necessarily doing it wrong. And then ideal recommendation writing. Most boards do it either this way. They either do individual assignments. So you show up at your meeting, or maybe your staff person's assigned you a case before you got there and you've already done your recommendation. So you're looking at individual cases. So you're looking at individual case, and I'm writing a recommendation for this specific case. Or some boards do it where the kind of group has a group conversation. Child welfare comes in, they have multiple copies of the child welfare report, the ISP, that sort of thing. They kind of talk about each case as a group, and then one person kind of writes the recommendation, usually the chair. Either one of those is okay. It really is. If you are doing it individually, I encourage you to read those out loud before you leave to your entire board. They might have a suggestion. They might have some additional information. I think that's kind of the intent of PARB, is it's not one person, but everybody has at least an opportunity to throw their 2 cents into your recommendation. And if you're doing it as a group, I would encourage you to get that recommendation written before you leave, so it's detailed and your wording is accurate. And I have this on the credentialing checklist. These are like 3 check boxes here that I have on there. Is the recommendation provide specific suggestions that are unique to the case being reviewed? Can I look at your recommendation and tell that it's for this case, or you have 5 other recommendations that are identical to this? And that takes practice. I'm not saying if you have 2 recommendations that are similar, you're doing it wrong. But if you can get as detailed as you can, that's great. Provide justification on why you're saying what you're saying, and clear and easy to understand. Does that make sense? That is really all I had. Can't believe I got through that all in an hour. You guys are doing awesome job out there reviewing the cases. We've got the court improvement conference next week where we get a chance to say hello to a bunch of judges. Every year I hear from judges that say, we really appreciate the PARB recommendations, appreciate the effort. And, you know, I know this wasn't as much of a conversation as it was just me talking. If you want to talk through any of these more, just reach out to me specifically. But we do have a few more minutes, so let's go ahead and have spend the last 8 minutes talking about some of this. Thoughts?
I have a question, and I'm fairly new. I've only done 2 cases, so it may seem very basic. But when I'm filling out my recommendations to the judge, above that, is that something the judge will read, or is that just for my information?
What which part? Which
The
part are you
notes
talking?
Well, at the
Oh, the
very end, when I
notes?
give the notes above my recommendation.
Well, it's gonna. I don't think that actually prints on the. That's really just for you.
It does. I think it does print. I have
does it?
noticed.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, which I mean, that might be something that we talk about. I don't know. But it does typically, that findings does print. Which I mean, it is great to put like some context there. Or if you're talking about there's also like notes at the bottom of each of the fields, and that does not print. So if you put like, I don't know. I don't know if I'm making sense, because I don't know if y'all know what I'm talking about, but there's like notes on each of the pages, and those do not print at all. But
I think what I'm talking about is like, it's a box right above before we make our recommendations. Like, for example, with my last case, most of my pertinent information came from a conversation from the DHS worker rather than the court documents. And I didn't know if that would be a good place for me to indicate for myself where I got a lot of the information, but I don't want to bog down the judges having to read too much information.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So it's the findings you're talking about.
Yes.
The way I kind of look at it is findings is more when you're writing down facts. Dad just got out of prison. Mom, finished, rehab, whatever. And facts can be good information as kind of reminders to you, or even reminders to the judge of maybe what happened. But then in the recommendation part is, therefore we recommend this, that this should happen or this should happen. But when and the findings are not required. I don't know if you noticed, there's no red star on those. So you could leave the findings completely blank, but you do have to fill out the recommendation part. And when you print, if you print from the database, both of those, the findings and the recommendations, are both printed.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you.
I have a question, and you might have already gone over it, and maybe I misunderstood, but when we, we have our case assigned, we review it at that monthly meeting, and then I know in the database, I think there's a section where we put the information for when it's going to be reviewed again in court. And so is there a way that we need to go about requesting that we can like re-review the file after the next court day, or is that something we would just like Shelby, would I just like reach out to Shelby and ask like, hey, can you assign me that case again? Or how would I need to go about doing that?
Yes, just let me know, and I will, I'll take note of that, and I can get that back up for review for you.
Okay,
that's
awesome.
a good question.
Thank
you. But to add to that, there's two boxes in the database. One says next court date. That's the date that they're going to court again, if you know it. I just leave it blank if you don't know when they're going to court next. It's not that useful of information. There's also next review date. That's what I was talking about earlier. That basically is when you say you want to see it again. So obviously telling Shelby, telling Sarah Lynn, I want to see this in a month. I want to see this in 2 months. They'll make sure that happens. But if you also put that in there, of next review date 2 months from now, then that's another way to make sure that'll happen.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yes, and I do check that. So if you ever like forget to tell me, but you put that next review date, I'll see that and I can upload it for you.
You're the best.
What do y'all think about, I don't know, this kind of trying to write down more of our methods and kind of identifying best practice? I mean, what do you think about that as a concept? Is it overly burdensome? Do these kind of guidelines seem fair, stringent?
I felt that it was condensed in a way that was easy for me to understand. One thing that maybe to consider, just because I think I've reviewed 2 cases at this point, so I'm still very new. But one thing that I could see that would have maybe helped me when I first started was if you guys could somehow make like just a short, like bullet point list essentially of like, when we're making our final recommendations on that database, like these are the things you want to hit on most according to that statute you showed earlier. Because when I was reading that, when you had it in the presentation, for me, I don't know if I was maybe just making it more difficult on myself, but I mean, it made it easier when I was reading that statute.
Do you mean on what to look for in the review? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, what to look for in the review, yeah. And then I feel like that could also help towards like when you're making those final recommendations.
Gotcha.
I like that. Maybe we could even make like a little guide or something. That would be, I always like making a guide, so that might be helpful.
I like that idea.
Yeah,
Yes.
Shelby, that was what I was gonna say is just from like running programs, and I know you guys say all this stuff till you're like blue in the face, but we don't always get it. So maybe having like a reference guide. I know whenever I went through my initial training, Shelby was really good about like breaking down how all of this works. But yeah, maybe having something that we could go back to, or maybe like an online portal, or even like a Canva document or something that people could go back to.
Really like that because I know like I set up those meetings and I've heard actually multiple times like people say, okay, I forgot this. And I mean that's so normal because it's so much information. So
Yeah.
I think like if we had a guide, I love this. So I think we should run with it. Yes.
Yeah, and then you know, as if you guys make changes or whatever, you just blast out an email and just say, "Hey, heads up, like this has changed, or we added this, or you know, whatever." But yeah, something that people could reference back to, and then of course you all probably would continue to add to it as things were asked, maybe. But yeah, I think having like a reference guide would be awesome.
I like it.
Reference guide on what to fill out in the online form, or reference guide
On all of it.
okay.
But yes, yeah, like what to fill out, like things that are standard across all boards, because I know also that some boards, you know, they might function a little bit differently, but like things that are standard, I think would be awesome to have all written down in one place that we could get to. Even like Keith, like even things like that explains like what the board is, so that if we have like colleagues who are interested in joining the board, that could be housed in that central location as well. I mentioned Canva just because it's like free and pretty easy to use, but anything like Google Drive or Dropbox or somewhere that could like house everything, you know?
I like that. That's a really good idea.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay, so it's 101. Any other questions, thoughts? Well, reach out if something doesn't make sense, or you not sure what to do in a certain situation. Reach out. I mean, that's what Shelby and Sarah Lynn and I's job is to support you. That's our first, middle, and last job. All right. Well, with that, I will let you guys go. See you on the block.